like a guy.
94.9 Zeta, that is Marilyn Manson, Dope Hat, and yeah, we got a bunch of them right here in the studio. A bunch of Dope Hats. They're filming, it's a documentary type, so it's a film crew, and they're doing a documentary on Marilyn Manson. Everyone who's known him, all the bad things we could say about him, but really, who would care if you said anything bad about Marilyn Manson? It's already in his book, really! And most of that, all this film's going to be pretty much R-rated.
Oh my God, kill your mom and dad, kill yourself.
It is said that every generation can be defined by its music, and more often than not by the artist who creates the image. While some artists play it safe and mimic their counterparts, there are some that push the threshold and create entirely new genres of music. These artists are often a shock to the mainstream and cause quite a bit of controversy. But it is this controversy that gives fuel and gives birth to such rock demons as Marilyn Manson. He is not the first and probably won't be the last, because what is considered shocking and offensive to one generation may well become mainstream and widely accepted to the next. In 1987, when a freckle-faced kid named Brian Warner started covering the alternative music scene for a local rag, no one knew then that he would go on to become one of the most revered and most feared celebrities in America.
He had this attitude that's the first thing that I thought about him was that he probably got beaten up a lot as a kid. He had a lot of anger and hostility, but he was a very quiet person. You know, the kind that you expect is going to be a serial killer someday. You know, you have to watch out for the quiet ones. Well, he had this innate anger in him that would just be great for writing.
I don't think you guys really want to hear that song. Fuck you! I want to hear next motherfucker gonna get my medal as loud as you can.
I remember he interviewed the Thrill Kill Cult back in their evil days. And I remember Brian coming out of the interview basically shaking that he was never met somebody that bizarre and satanic, I guess he called them. He said he had like animal bones and feet, you know, around his neck, and he just totally was shocked by Groovy's whole look and everything.
I used to let him pick what bands he would interview, and one of them was the Thrill Kill Cult. I don't remember much about the interview itself, but I remember afterwards he was freaked out by them. They were really spooky people. They were just so weird. Were they devil worshippers or what? And when you view that in context as to what he's doing now, it makes them look like kindergarten people, you know?
After interviewing the Thrill Kill Cult, Brian may have been shocked and inspired, but it didn't last long. In fact, Brian Warner claims that while he was writing positive reviews about bands, he was far from impressed by the whole scene.
We found a niche and we kind of got in there. That's where I first met Brian Warner. He would get up and do poetry, and he was writing for a local magazine, and eventually he came to us and said he was forming a band, and would we put him on stage? And we kind of like said, yeah, sure.
I was always like the one into the music. He used to come to my warehouses and just hang out while I practiced. He always wanted to be a writer, and he would do like a poetry night at a club or whatever. Scott was like a master of a 4-track, and he, I guess, wrote some music and asked Brian to come along and sing on it. I didn't even really know about it when he was doing it. He came after they recorded it and said, hey, I got this project, we're going to call it Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids. You know, listen to the music and tell me what you think. And it was cool, you know. I liked it.
Scott had all this stuff recorded, and he came into the studio and he stood up with a friend of his, Brian Warner, who actually, I guess, took a megaphone or something and sang the parts. And we mixed it down, and we released this CD called The Funnel Zone.
So, with some material to sing and a couple of friends to form a band, Brian Warner was ready to flaunt his beautiful woman meets serial killer trademark and took to the stage.
I was one of the 21 people who saw them when they played at Churchill's for their first gig. And the first memory I had was that Brian was so nervous that he was afraid he was going to throw up before he went on stage. And I kept thinking, if he doesn't get over his stage fright, he's just going to die up there. But the crowd kind of liked it.
Well, when they first came out, I hated them. They were horrible. But I like the fact they get on stage and do whatever the hell they wanted.
First show was at Churchill's Hideaway. Probably 30 people were there. But 30 people seemed to like it.
I'm Alicia. That's what Brian named me in the book. I don't know where he got that name from, but that's me. I met Brian back when I was about 16 or 17 years old at the Press Prize. Round, go, dancing, 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 woo! Brian comes up and he grabs my boob. I'm like, fuck you! I'm like that. Take me for a ride. The big fat guy that was the manager at the time came out and goes, hey, the singer wants to apologize. I said, okay. I'll go back to her. I talked to him. He was no, he apologized. Seemed like a really nice guy.
A couple of gigs, a few practices, and already Mr. Manson's band was on shaky ground.
So Marilyn, why don't you introduce your kids to us?
All right, I'm Marilyn Manson. I'm on vocals.
Hey, I'm Gidget Gine, bass playing, body piercing, and skin peeling.
I'm Daisy Berkowitz, guitar.
Hi, I'm Donovan Gacy, and I'm into keyboards, and I really like little boys, too.
I even saw them. They didn't even have a live drummer at the time. In place of the live drums was a playpen, and there was some chick in there. They were feeding her raw eggs, like in the movie Pink Flamingos.
It was pretty cool. They just never had a drummer, and at the time, the whole being a band thing was, I mean, Ministry just came out, 9 Inch Nails just came out, so people were gradually dealing with bands that didn't have a drummer. But Brian knew he had to get a drummer eventually. It just added.
So I remember they had talked about getting a drummer, and it wasn't soon after that that they got one. And it made a dramatic difference. I remember the first time I saw them with the drummer, and it was really cool. I mean, it was just a lot more energy. And I was kind of worried they would really change the sound a lot, and the sound evolved.
Sarah Lee Lucas. I was in a band with him before he was in Marilyn Manson, and he always had some football injury, and he had a muscle disease in his legs. So he had always a problem, I thought, keeping time with his kick drum. After we left the band, Brian was talking about getting Fred into the band, and I had discussed with him this would be a problem, and Brian, I guess, didn't really think so until years later when, I guess his legs got worse and he wasn't able to keep up with the Manson standards, so he was let go, I heard, not too pleasantly.
The decade started with the first human drummer joining the lineup of the Spooky Kids, and for the Reverend Manson, there was no turning back. The band attracted a following, and from there produced various self-released cassettes, including Big Black Bus, Lunchbox, and Grist a Line, to name a few.
I think they saw an opportunity and ran with it. It's the American way.
This opportunity just happened to lie in Brian Warner's own backyard. The South Florida music scene was ripe for something new, something with an edge.
Back then, the club scene in South Florida was so different. There were so many live venues. There's not a lot of support down here in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. And Miami's more of a tourist thing. They rather go to a house club or a techno club and dance. They don't want to see a live band. They get more out of dancing and, rolling, I guess, tripping on ecstasy than supporting a live act, which is kind of unfortunate.
So the stage became the backdrop for the wild and outrageous dramas that set this band apart from the others.
Chicken livers and chicken feet being stomped on the stage, which was carpeted, then around the room on the dance floor, and in corners and crevices that you could never get it. And of course, that night, a Haitian crew, cleaning crew for the nightclub coming in, and whatever bad voodoo, you know what I mean? Seeing chicken feet, they didn't want to mess around. So it was kind of like, trying to convince them, it's just garbage. Clean it up, will you? Come on.
I guess I met Brian for the first time at Squeeze when I was bartending there. He'd come in all the time and sit in the dark corner and just sort of watch people. It took me by surprise how professional he was. The Easter show was actually my topless debut. I had never performed naked before or without a top or anything, and they had me tied to the cross. And even backstage, he's putting the grease paint on my nipples and doing the ab cuts like he does with the grease paint. And it was all business. It was all business. He made me feel comfortable. He could tell I was nervous about being naked in front of the home crowd.
They were very interactive with their fans, with their flyers. They were very creative with themselves. I know of one show I wasn't there for, but I'd heard it was some sort of New Year's show where instead of, say, the champagne toast or the ball drop, they had a piñata filled with chicken guts that they released upon the crowd.
At times he would throw, like, he would go to a butcher shop and get, like, hearts and gizzards and things, throw them out in the crowd, and people didn't know what they were. They were thought that they were some kind of party favor or something, until it hit them in the face, or they actually grabbed it and they found out that it was blood and gore.
These one-act plays of gore and goth began to attract several major record labels, and eventually the attention of Nine Inch Nails frontman Trent Reznor. And in 1993, the break came, when, having dropped the Spooky Kids moniker, Marilyn Manson was signed to Reznor's Nothing Records, a new division of Interscope.
I was part of their record release party here. What was that like? It was a lot of fun. Marilyn Manson played in the Lizard Lounge. They did an acoustic set, which included the first version of Sweet Dreams. Then they had local bands come in and cover their songs. And it was a great event. It was just amazing. It was a Wednesday night, but it felt like a Saturday or a Thursday.
But when Mr. Manson was not performing on stage with the Spooky Kids, he was still in the spotlight, pulling attention with his crazy antics both on and off stage.
It was fun, though. He'd come by and he'd be there for like an hour, 2 hours during the show, and just answering the phones. He'd like get off on answering the phone. He'd play like this character, this really warped janitor, and just he liked to fuck with people.
I was walking down the street in South Beach where I lived at the time. I saw Brian. Bastard! He goes, "Why come in the studio recording portraits? Got a new album. Want to hang out?" They come up with this idea from out of nowhere. They come in and they bring bags of meat. Take the meat and put it on me. So he puts the meat on me, he had a steak on my head. You're a fucking bastard! With hot dogs, 2 hot dogs in the front, 2 hot dogs in the back, hanging by string. Nice to meet you.
A couple of years ago at the Ambassador Club, the Impotent Sea Snake show, Brian was in the crowd. He tried to get into the act, but there was a baby carriage that the clown had, which he's no longer with the band. Brian ended up in the carriage with his ass up in the air, and they got him in the show. They pulled his pants down. They shoved 2 fingers up his ass, and he went screaming and running out of the club like a little faggot with his pants around his ankles. And that's the infamous Ambassador Club story.
When we were promoting that show, Brian was drawing these fucking pictures, man. They're unreal. Like, he had the fat lady bent over getting fucked by the Dr. Seuss cat in a hat, with the dildos and all that kind of shit. And he had pictures of all the Ambugalard cast. He had us all, me with the muscles. He had Dan like screaming with the metal fists and shit. He had Jory with his cock out. He had everybody, you know, sketched down to a T.
What I was trying to do at the Slammies was recognize the hard music scene. Now, Ambugalard is probably most noted now for being the band that spawned Twiggy Ramirez. Twiggy got up there, or Jordy as we called him. He accepted the award.
I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank Dan Montana. I'd like to thank Bob Franquez, George Koukouris, Chad Steinhardt, Barry Alpert, Sean Rogers, Darth Vader, George Lucas, anybody that voted for me. That's it.
I had Mr. Manson present the award for national release, which I knew Saigon Kick was going to win. And when no one from Saigon Kick showed up, Brian took it upon himself to invite Jordy up on stage. This was before Jordy joined Marilyn Manson. He was still in Ambugalard at the time.
Jordy might accept it, because he's the next best thing to Matt Kramer. Thank you very much.
Does anybody want to smash it on the dance floor? Unless they're here to accept it. I guess we're going to have to smash it on the dance floor. Oh, you hit a girl. Are you alright? I didn't mean to hit you. Love is on the way.
Because just like his namesakes, Manson soon began to find himself surrounded by a family of fans.
And so I shot pictures of them when it was just Brian Tattoo, Nick Perry, Scott, and Brian Warner. This was my first professional one with the band here. That was shot in Brian's parking lot of where he lived. What happened with my relationship with the Mansons is once they went national, they were starting to get a hell of a lot of fan mail, and Brian asked me to run that for him because he trusted me to handle the money and to, respond quickly. This is the original master copy of the reply letter for everyone that wrote to the Marilyn Manson family. Brian put this together, pasted it all, and I ran it off for him and sent this sucker out. This was a typical fan letter. This is the envelope it came in. This is, part of the reason why I would quit. This is what somebody sent. Can I swear on this? Sure. Says, "Hey, you assholes, what's taking you guys so fucking long to respond?" That was my fault. This is a letter written in blood by a 12-year-old from Los Angeles, California, saying he's on Valium and liquor. And when he would get drowsy, the son would lead the kid down to the basement, and he would hold him down on a mattress, and you know what I'm talking about, that sort of thing. This is from a 12-year-old. Here's another one from Yorkville, Illinois. And this one says, let's see, "May maggots eternally feast upon your flesh and innards, and of course your pleasantly bloated cadavers, and always remember hugs and kisses. P.S. As you decay and rot among the regurgitated feces, always remember I love you." That is how people showed their love to him, by saying wonderful things like that. And I guess you can probably see why I would quit doing that. Thousands and thousands coming in a week, I just couldn't take it anymore.
The sadistic leader of this now world-famous band had a softer side.
To me, the nicest thing about Marilyn Manson was Brian's girlfriend, Missy, who was a sweetheart, who in those days I told Brian that she's too good for him. And I'm just sorry that she's not with him to enjoy all the effort she put in to help him get where he has gotten.
When I first met Brian was back in the summer of '92, actually at a Beastie Boys concert. He was there with his first kind of long-term girlfriend. I was with a bunch of my friends, and we had seen each other before just because of the music scene or whatever. And at the show, we kind of made eye contact, but he was with his girlfriend, and I wasn't going to try and pursue anything. So after the show, his band was playing later on at the weekend or whatever at Washington Square, and he was passing out flyers for that show. And as I passed, he made sure that he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, here's a flyer for my next show. I really want you to go. If you can, bring a paper airplane and a bottle of Jack Daniels." And I just kind of looked at him, knowing perfectly well that I was never going to be able to get a bottle of Jack Daniels, being that I was like 17 years old, already underage, for any sort of nightclub, but, didn't happen. Never went. So the next weekend after that was the Slammy Awards, and he was with Jordy. Ran into him then. Jordy and I were friends before Brian and I were friends, so he introduced me to him, and he was, "I gotta get your number, and, I'm going away to Tampa this weekend for a show, so here's my number, I'll call you," and we ended up getting together after that.
And then there were those who would, in the Reverend Manson's mind, turn against him and pay for it later.
Basically, Brian got arrested in Jacksonville. During the show, apparently he had 2-foot plastic phallus on. He was stroking it and squirted out a liquid onto the crowd. And Jacksonville is a home for 3 Christian Coalition type organizations. They really don't cotton to that. So they arrested him. I got the police report. So I put Brian's name in the paper because anytime someone gets arrested, that's what you do. I still can't believe that Brian Hugh Warner got so bent out of shape because I printed his name in the paper. But he thought he was special. He thought that he should have a special exception. he gets on the phone, and basically with his attitude like I'm supposed to suck his butt, like I guess all the other local writers did, and said not to use his name again or there would be consequences. And I said, like what? And he said that I would have to look over my shoulder and worry about my physical well-being, although I don't remember the exact words. I said, are you really going to do something? And he said, no, not me, my fans.
I think Brian called him up and left him some sort of death threat.
And he just repeated, look, I said, don't use my name. He basically went off and said a whole bunch of other stupid things that I later put in a column, which really made him mad. And apparently Laura Werder, who was running his fan club at the time, said he was throwing stuff against the wall and cursing my name, which sort of made me happy.
Manson once described his girlfriend as the only person left that he was capable of feeling any love for, and through a rocky 6-year relationship, Missy became the closest person to Brian Hugh Warner. A major part of his personal and professional life, Missy knew what made Manson tick better than anyone else.
Brian's parents were really funny. I don't know, I'm sure you've heard the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It's kind of true. Brian's mom, Barbara, had these pet mice, like rat-size mice, huge, like water rats, white, with red eyes. Anyways, she had this one, and it died. She didn't know what to do with it. And I go into the freezer, and I had no idea that this rat had died or anything like that, because I was just coming back to the house, and I wasn't living there at the time. So I open up the freezer, grab ice or something, and see this big, huge saran wrap ball mess in the corner of the freezer. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, Barbara, what? You can't put a rat in the freezer like this. Well, you had the little lizard in there too, and no. No. After I told Brian that, he was like, oh, jeez, here we go again. Always, like, weird things like that. His parents were really cool. Really, 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 really cool, supportive. Want nothing more than the best for their son, besides the fact that she put a dead rat in the freezer, but...
I have to say that they are a bizarre couple. Kind of Brady's on acid or something.
His parents were mainstream America. His father was a businessman, his father had been in the service, and all his father and his mother wanted to do was help advance him to reach his goal.
They've always been, like, kooky. Recently, I was over at his parents' house. His mom has, like, a collection of rats. She wanted to give me one. 2 of them can't sleep unless she tucks them into bed.
Ah, Papa Manson. Any influence on Mr. Manson? I would say yes.
Hugh always had a thing for, like, the younger girls at Brian's show. Not that he would do anything, but just he was always the guy that told the dirty jokes.
Like when we were back in Marilyn Manson days, like I'd go and hang out over at his house, and it'd be like we'd have like a couple girls in the room and people that his parents didn't even know. And his dad would come in the room in his underwear and just start talking to us, scratching himself.
I don't know. He's cool.
But what of Brian Warner? What was he like off the stage? His autobiography chronicles some of the famed Manson escapades in great detail. But we were able to obtain rare home video footage which profiles Mr. Manson in a slightly different light than his carefully devised media persona. In this home video, we see Brian Warner and his clan up to their usual antics. 2 girls from Orlando were nice enough to let the band stay at their house, and when the girls went to get the Mansons some food, well, I bet they never thought this would happen.
All right, somebody go to town with those underwear right over there.
Here, buddy. Let's check out the crust.
Who's gonna smell the crust?
Let's find a crispy spot.
Oh my God. Oh wait, let me back up and focus on that. Is it brown?
Yeah, it's brown. It's totally brown, man. Look at that.
Oh, that is incredible. What is that?
That's another crispy spot.
You gotta get the light on this side. You gotta get the light. You gotta get
oh, wait.
It's got dirty crotches.
Oh, this one's clean.
Perfect. Do something to it, though. Rub it on your balls or something. That is so juvenile. That's awesome. Okay.
We've all heard of Brian Warner's interest in porn, from hanging out with Tracy Lords and Jenna Jameson, but we never knew he was into doggy porn.
Come on. Show me your fucking balls. Come on.
Good evening, I'm George Wilson. The House showed its support for President Clinton.
It's a girl?
Today, rejecting two Republican alternative Senate votes next week.
You like that, huh? Look at you. You like that, huh? Dog pornography. Come here. Come here. Come here.
The next footage you see may be cruel to some, or just Mother Nature to others.
Don't stop the camera. You filming?
I'm filming.
His heart is beating fast. Good night. There's some shit in the corner. Whoa, whoa. Good night. Get that on film. Get that.
Freedom, although freedom is an abstract concept. You want me to face that way?
Hey, everybody don't
Is
move.
this from-
Get the fuck on the floor.
Freedom, as in freedom of speech, is an abstract concept. Cake represents the freedom and the ability and the freedom to pursue knowledge and the wealth of knowledge. Censorship and limitations on things such as the Bill of Rights. So that is the dichotomy of cake and sodomy, and that's what we're all, well, not all about, but that's what tonight's show is about.
Back when Brian was still like in a local band, hadn't been signed yet, but still trying, we would take off and go on these little excursions to Orlando.
Videotape the fail. Videotape that. Did you eat it?
Drop acid and, you know, get followed around by the Disney agent police officers because we were cutting in line, or, you know, messing around with little kids or fat women.
Jordy, you go on that side over there. Jordy, you, no, over on the other side. Vanilla milkshake. Ah, there he is. Now pull out your dick, Jordy. Pull out your dick. Oh, I'd like to know you.
Here we see Brian Warner's more playful side.
Is it on there?
That's a rat.
Show me your balls on TV.
No, because you'll show it to your parents.
No, I won't, I promise. Just
No,
don't
you
miss
show it to your parents all the time.
Hang on a second. Pick it up.
Brian made some funny crank calls, and here he and Twiggy are listening to them.
We like that mixed with like kissing, kind of like Iron Maiden with the techno kind of on the top. No way.
Even rock stars have to go to the bathroom, but only Mr. Manson would bring in a video camera and film himself. Notice that even back then the whole androgynous idea was in his head. Mr. Manson paying homage to a famous demonic statue in Spain.
Say hi.
Look at me. I'm on the devil.
Say hi. Hello. Say hi, Sean Bevan.
Hello, Sean Bevan.
But while other bands and loyal fans all but worshiped the Reverend Manson, the road to stardom wasn't paved, and on the inside it was a rocky ride from the start. The members of the band that called themselves Marilyn Manson kept changing, and friendship was the price Brian Warner paid each time he decided that someone was on the outs.
I guess he met Brad. Brian used to be a fan of Saigon Kick and stand in the front row. and just totally rag him out, that they would have to jump off stage and actually get physical with him. So we were out front and south one night, I remember, and Brad was out in the parking lot. He just got chased out of the club by Saigon Kick because he heckled him so bad they had to stop playing. And I guess Brian tried to go over there and fight him. I don't know if they were in fighting or what, but they weren't friends, so I don't know how the whole him playing bass came about, but I know at first they hated each other.
Well, what was his name in Manson?
Gidget Gain?
Gidget Gain or something. Well, I replaced him in a band, but it was probably best for him because when he met Brian kind of saw Brad. He saw the image of what he wanted to represent. Brian had the good vision, and then he got Scott, who could play quirky stuff.
Scott was hopeless, though.
Well,
Brad was the band.
Yeah, but
Scott is a good player, but image-wise, he was hopeless. Brad was the guy. He was the man. Definitely.
All right, well, that's coming from a girl who had a crush on the guy at the time.
All the girls had a crush on fucking
But I mean, they all come.
And they had this long-haired fucking freak transvestite bass player that all the girls used to love. He was like a cross between like the Spice Girls and fucking Winger. And as soon as he started shooting up heroin, he's like the only one in the band, I think, that did all these drugs. They gave him the boot. Goodbye, you're gone.
Brad, I think, had an image which Marilyn Manson was trying to show, like do drugs and be a rock and roll star and all that, and that was Brad entirely.
They got rid of Brad because he did drugs, but then they ended up like drugs are cool.
I remember when Brad was on his way out of the band, he got to record on Portrait, the first album, down here, and he was actually out in LA too, but Brian was just like at wit's end with him at that time, just because it was, you know, if he wasn't out trying to score heroin the night before, then, you know, he was looking for it that day in the studio, and these trampy, sleazy women are coming by the studio, and, you know, every day there was something else, and it was like killing Brian because Brad was like his best friend, and he was the one with the style and with the girls, and he was, you know, Mr. Casanova, and, you know, he was great. Brian loved him. They spent a lot of time together, but then Brad was just going down, down, down. You could tell, and, you know, if he wasn't falling off the stage because he was so high, you know, in the middle of a show, then it was something else, or he wasn't showing up to practice, or whatever.
I remember seeing the last show they did with Brad. I think it was at the +5. He was just really messed up. It was really sad, and I mean, I felt bad because, I mean, here he is. He's part of this band that are gonna make it, and he just couldn't get his act together. And so it's like, kind of on the one hand, I thought, well, it's really cool that the band is, you know, intolerant of drug abuse. You know, I don't think they're intolerant of drug use, but drug abuse certainly. And I know Brian was always really concerned about Missy and the friends that she would hang out with. You know, a lot of heroin use going on in the clubs. And but then you hear stories about themselves, and so I don't know what the real story is. You know, well, you know, are they hypocrites, or did they fall off a wagon themselves, or, you know, dabble a little bit, or, you know, you don't know what to really believe.
One time Brian needed a ride to go to see Brad. And Brad was actually in rehab, and Brian was just like, you know, I don't think I can tell him that he's not going to be in the band. And now, at this place, you know, a kid will just die. So we went to go see him, and what happened was Brian came back and he was just like in tears. He was like, I couldn't do it. And he's like, you know, I'm losing my best friend, I'm losing a band member. He's like, this sucks. And he just came back and he was just like bawling, and it was horrible. But, you know, shortly after that they had like an intervention with him that never helped, and then after that he was out of the band, but he still, you know, recorded on Portrait. He never toured with them or anything, but that was that.
From the clubs to the slammies, Manson was everywhere that music was. And it was during this first year as a signed band that Brian Warner finally recruited the one band member he thought was a perfect fit for the Manson motif.
I remember Joy used to be this little metal kid. almost looked like a troll. He just kind of wandered a hallway like in his AC/DC shirts or whatever and trench coat. Always looked dirty.
Man, Jordy loved to whip his penis out and just show it to people because he was so proud of it. I mean, it was not that, you know, there's anything wrong with it. I'm not that way, but it was pretty impressive. He would like be standing in the hall of the hotel, you know, and just like pull it out and just like whip it around like it was a piece of rope. It was nuts.
Scott in New Orleans was pretty much the butt of everyone's jokes, sadly enough. But from my point of view, Scott's a really hard person to work with. I think he's stubborn. He's going to do it that way, and he's not going to listen to anybody else. And if he has to bend, then it sucks. Must suck if he has to bend. So Scott was just hard to work with, and then once again, Brian had it in for you, and you started doing stupid shit, then fuck you. One time in the studio, they took a plate full of all of Scott's pics, and they were all, you know, signed Daisy Berkowitz. And they threw them all in the microwave, set the microwave like on 10 minutes. Exploded everywhere, pics all over the place, and it was just, you know, it was hilarious for all of us, hilarious. And then, of course, you know, Scott comes in, what happened to my stuff? Well, I don't know. I don't know how it got in the microwave. I don't know why it melted all over the place. It was just shit like that. And then Brian and Scott just weren't getting along at all. And Jordy was writing half of Antichrist anyway, so fuck Scott. Send him home.
Manson was no stranger to rumors. Accusations of jealousy and temper tantrums plagued the band as member after member was ushered out.
If you did one thing, one little thing that got underneath Brian's skin, that bothered him for the rest of the day, for the rest of the week, for the rest of the month, that bothered him. So, and he would think about that, and it would just drive him insane. Little things. If you said something that wasn't funny in the midst of all your friends hanging out, then fuck you. I hate you. Go away. I remember on the Nails tour, Freddie used to take these like broncholators, and it would like speed it. They were speed, pretty much, you know. And it would get him so crazy that he would just like bounce out of his stool trying to play drums in the middle of a tour. And then finally it was just like he couldn't even keep up anymore. It was just driving Brian insane. And then if it wasn't Freddie, you know, making a fool out of himself, then it was something else. But Freddie wasn't a bad guy.
Marilyn Manson had this tour manager named Frankie.
Frankie was, I don't think he was ever a tour manager, and his first tour that he goes on is the band's first tour that they go on, which was just sheer chaos. I don't think Frankie knew what he was doing half the time. But, I mean, he tried really hard, and it's hard when you're friends with someone and you have to be their manager as well. I think Brian figured out when you take somebody that's your friend on the road, they're not your friend when they come back.
If anyone truly knows Brian, it's the woman formerly behind the man. Missy is probably the one person who could set the record straight on just about any of the Manson rumors.
The worst thing is when, you know, Brian's on tour and here I am, I'm out at my local bar and hanging out with my friend, and you get this guy that comes out. Hey, you're that girl that goes out with Marilyn Manson. Yeah, whatever. You know, who are you? What do you want? I heard that he got his bottom 2 ribs removed so he could lean down and suck his own dick. Did he do that? Did he really do that? Jesus Christ. What do you think? Well, I don't know. Oh, and then he was the kid that was on The Wonder Years, Paul. There's a little bit of an age difference with these people. Do they not know that? Things like that just would drive me crazy. It's like, how can you be so stupid?
But the Reverend Manson had hard shoes to fill, even for good old Dad. For now, Mr. Manson was about to face his biggest adversary.
There were these really, really, really scary times, I remember. Brian's in this Mormon, you know, town where, you know, it's all about God. And in the middle of the show, he was told not to rip up the Bible like he did every other show out there. He said, listen, you know, not this show. Don't do it. If you do it, you're going to be fined. They're going to, you know, throw you in jail. Who knows what's going to happen? Well, of course, You know, you should have never said that to him. It was ripping up pages of the Bible. From then on, it was just chaos. After that, every show there was a problem, especially like in the Bible Belt. Death threats, bomb threats. People, I remember he would call me before a show and he's like, well, we got 2 bomb threats today and a death threat. And I'm just like, Jesus, you know, I'm going to get a phone call after the show and be like, you know, there was no show because your boyfriend was assassinated outside, and the people, that's when they were picketing up and down. They were trying to boycott the shows. And the, you know, the holy rollers are praying for, you know, his life and this and that, and God save him and save all the kids that are listening to this crazy music.
Now, with the controversy brewing, Marilyn Manson had come into his own. Some of the decisions Manson made in the early days are coming back to haunt him in the form of lawsuits. Ex-band members who want some credit for Marilyn Manson's success.
You see Brian, he's on TV every 13 seconds, and Scott helped him get to that point. I mean, he played on the first 3 albums and everything, and he's, you know, the guy, you know, he has to drive like a beat-up car and stuff. I think he deserves at least, you know, at least something, at least what he's owed. And I think it's terrible that he has to go to court to get what he's owed.
Eventually, it was Missy that had to go. After 6 years, the relationship ended.
The last trip we went on was to Europe, and everything was good out there, but yet I knew everything wasn't as good as it was. Not that it was like perfect because he was gone all the time or whatever, but coming back from Europe and being out in Europe, it was kind of like, you know, the signs were showing up here and there, and I was just like, well, you know, I should probably start pulling away from this because I know it's not going to go much further. So then when I came back home, and my birthday's in December, first week in December, and Brian was coming down for the Rolling Stones Smashing Pumpkins concert. As you know, him and Billy are tight, so he was going to come down and sing a song with Billy at the Stones show. And he's like, look, I'm coming into town. I hadn't seen him for like 4 or 5 months. He comes down or whatever, and I knew that he was like seeing other people, but yet I was seeing other people too. But this was like, I was going into this thinking, I'm like, okay, either, you know, something good is going to come out of this or this is going to be it. But I was kind of leaning towards the fact that this is probably, you know, closure right here with him coming down. But yet I was so excited to see him. We went to the show, and after the show, there was like a big party and a big explosion, too, between me and Brian because, you know, both of us were drinking and all these feelings just, you know, didn't know where to go. And it was just like, it didn't turn out good. But then, you know, I have this mediator, and the mediator happens to be Billy, and he's telling me, you know, you gotta just let it go. You guys love each other. Leave it at that. You know, go your separate ways. But you know, you always have what you had, and that was probably the best advice. And I knew too that, you know, this was probably it. But I mean, we're still friends. I still talk to him. You know, we keep in touch. I always will keep in touch with him. You know, I don't regret anything in the relationship at all. You know, so.
So you think he's gonna hate you for doing this?
Probably.
You don't think he will, do you?
I don't think so. I mean, it's not like I'm lying about anything. He'll just be, they probably won't give a shit at all. You know? He might, who knows, probably laugh about it, say what a dumbass I am, but I don't know. We'll see.
Manson wrote in his famed autobiography that there was no one else in the world who understood and accepted him as unconditionally as Missy did. There was no other girl he would feel that close to.
When it pertains to Marilyn Manson, I think he evaluated and he looked at the entire music scene, and he felt that for him to advance, he had to do something different. And the vehicle he chose was Satan. I think he doesn't believe it. I think he's using it, and very well, to his advantage. I think if it was real and he really believed it, then I think that he's gotten a little sick.
What do you think about all the, do you think it's an act? All it's like makeup and Satanism and stuff? Do you think it's like Ozzy Osbourne, Alice Cooper, all in that?
Oh, wait a minute now, wait a minute. Wait, Ozzy Osbourne, Alice Cooper, no.
Alice Cooper, no. Ozzy Osbourne, he bit a head off a rat.
Yeah, he did right on the face.
That takes a balls. That takes balls. But this Marilyn Manson, I looked at his picture
and you see some of these groups can't even fucking think of their fucking names, like Joe Shit in the Ragman and fucking 9 Inch Nails and all that fucking other weird shit.
See, it's all a farce, man. That's why I don't understand these religious zealots. They tell these kids, he's the Antichrist, stay away. They need reverse psychology. Kids, go ahead. He's a phony, we're not going to waste our time. Go waste your money, it's an act. Then we'll see how popular Mr. Manson is.
Good, the bad, the rumors, and even more stunning, the truth. Marilyn Manson's rise to celebrity status reads like a fairy tale gone awry, a rags to riches story, with incidences of sexual and mental abuse thrown in along the way. And when it's all said and done, the Reverend Manson denies nothing and blames no one. He just wants to be hated for all the right reasons.
I think that Brian Warner, when he brought Marilyn Manson to the scene, did a very positive thing. And I think he's continued to do a positive thing. I just think he's being totally misread. You know, he's making us think. That's what we need. That's what rock and roll is supposed to be. And that's what he is. He's rock and roll today.
For everything that Marilyn Manson is, he worked hard to get there. He was the only person in a band in this town at 3 o'clock in the morning at Kinko's Copy Center hand-drawing his own flyers.
A lot of the labels I was dealing with always had asked me, did you ever hear of Marilyn Manson? And I was pretty much like, yeah, you know, they asked me about the band and everything else. Nobody liked them. I mean, I must have visited every major label, independent. Everyone passed on Marilyn Manson. And I don't know if it was because of their shock value or, you know, they didn't take it seriously. But now look at them. Every album, they keep getting new members, and he keeps kicking out people and this and that. You know, if they piss him off, I guess he gives them the fucking boot, which is cool. But, you know, he's the one. He's the image of the band. He's the one all little kids look up to and jerk off to and slit their wrists to.
You know, when that Rolling Stone magazine came out with Brian on the cover, you know, it's like I knew they were going to make it, but just to see that.
Ain't nothing gets you richer to get your picture on the cover of the Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone.
Brian was always a perfect gentleman. I think Brian is to music what Howard Stern is to the radio. Shock people, and the more you shock them, the more they're going to listen. In his own way, he's a very intelligent person, very creative. I think a lot of what he does is completely put on. He's playing with the people, which is what shock is, to play with people. I believe I'm in his book, and he refers to me as the mafia type from Davy with the gold around his neck. Brian, if you see this, or if you hear, I make one promise to you. Next time I see you, I will put you over my knee and spank you, because I think that's what you need.
Hopefully they can survive physically. You know, physically is the most important thing, because your health is far more than any fame or money. Far more important.
Every decade a band like this comes along for their shock value. I think they can have longevity if they change with the times, like David Bowie always did and Madonna always did, you know. But I think they milked their original image for what it was worth. I think they have to move on now to the next thing, bigger and better things, and I think they're going to accomplish that. I could see Brian definitely, who's, you know, the brainchild behind it all. I could see him doing it, because he's definitely a shrewd guy and accomplished everything he set out to do over 10 years ago.
By the time this documentary has been released, Mr. Manson will have reinvented himself once again. He has now donned a more Bowie-esque identity and is quickly shedding his Antichrist image towards a kinder, gentler Marilyn Manson. With a new glam look and some breasts, he is definitely becoming more Marilyn than Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
Skinner, Deep Purple.
Shit. Really? I like
all of it.
I like the Stones. I like
I'm in the big 106 classic rock and roll.
But you don't like Marilyn Manson?
No.
Why? You a groupie?
No, no, it's just part of the whole music scene.
What about things like Jenna Jameson and Tracy Lords, things like that?
Can we not talk about that at all? Save whatever dignity I have left after this.
You know, in talking to Brian, I mean, it was all right there. I mean, I knew the kid was going to be a star. That's a terrible line. Don't use that.
Then Trev puts in this video. It was a shit-eating video. How would you like to eat shit and die, motherfucker? People were eating each other's shit. People were taking a ladder and hammering the guy's balls down and ripping it off. And we're all sitting there while this video, we're like, yeah, fuck off.
I mean, for a band to get their very first tour ever, to tour with Nine Inch Nails, who at the time was at their peak, you know, and open up for them, you know, I don't even think they knew how good they had it.
Brian's book, he kind of rags on a lot of people. A lot of them he uses fake names for whatever reason. I don't know why he uses some real names and some fake names. I guess he just wants to get sued by certain people. I have no idea.
I really miss metal. The fucking old days are the best. Back in middle school, I used to think Motley Crue was the most satanic out there. It's the most sickest, demented. You got a pentagram poster on your fucking wall, Motley Crue? Dude, you guys are going to hell and shit. But then I started liking, you know, Motley Crue and stuff, and they were the heavy thing going. I remember we'd go to the Sportatorium, and I'd try and dress up like Nikki Sixx with fucking egg whites in my hair and all this kind of shit, and I had black shoe polish under my eyes and everything. And then I was feeling all tough and bad, yo, I'm Nikki Sixx. And then I'd go there, and there'd be all these high school kids that are bigger than me, and they'd be like, hey, go home! Go back to mommy with that fucking makeup on your eyes and all this shit. And I almost got my ass kicked trying to be like Nikki Sixx. So it was really a real test of my metalhood to go to shows looking metal and everything else, because when you know you're so into it as a little kid you didn't know. Kind of like these kids today. I mean, oh my God, the way they're dressing now. They're following Manson the way I used to follow Motley Crue. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a beautiful thing. At least, you know, they're definitely struck a chord with the young kids today. You could say that.
Now he's the ruler now. He's just, you know, changing his image just like he's become more glam, this glam figure like Ziggy Stardust back in the day, which is cool, you know, he's ruling his own domain. But all these little kids are going to start running around buying like glitter makeup and feather boas and shit to look just like him. And he's got to stop calling me. He fucking annoys me all the time. He keeps calling me, leaving messages on cool tips. You know, I keep giving him these tips on what's next and what's hip and cool, but he won't leave me alone. What the fuck is wrong with him?
He's one of the big things right now.
Yeah, I know I just read it today.
What do you think about all that makeup and stuff that he wears, you know?
I don't ever razz that because I don't like it.
You prick. I mean, everybody's got to do what they have to do. But he's getting way out there, man.